Well, we are back. Welcome to the Electric Vibe podcast. I'm Harlan Hucky Austin, along with my two brothers, Kurt Hoffman. Kurt, say what up?
What's going on, people?
And my other brother, Jay David Silva. Jay,
Hello,
what's happening
everyone.
with you, man?
I'm chilling, doing well. Excited for today's episode.
Are you really?
I am.
I'm excited as well. I think you guys are going to find out some really interesting things about me tonight. So, today we have a really special guest. And this one's really special for me because not only is he a wonderful individual, but he's a childhood friend. We were raised in South Minneapolis together. Our families have known each other for many years. His mother, Jackie, and my mother, Dorothy, were very close friends. They used to have these amazing card parties, and I tell you what, and he's going to probably testify to this a little bit later on, they could play some spades like no one's business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
then our
Yes.
fathers were really good friends too. But
Yes.
without further ado, it is our honor to have the former police chief of Minneapolis, Mederia Arradondo, on us. Mederia, welcome to the Electric Vibe podcast.
Thank you all so very much for having me. I was just moved by getting the invitation to have a conversation with you and your listeners this evening. I'm truly, life for me is all about growth, and knowing all three of you, I know that will be permeating in today's space here. And so I'm humbled, I'm honored, and so I'm absolutely just thrilled and again, humbled and honored to be here with all of you this evening.
Well, thank you. We're going to get an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, and we're really excited. I got to tell you, Jay and Kirk and myself, we have been talking about this one for weeks. And you know what?
Yes.
You caught us at a really good time because I just joined the fellows about a month and a half, and so
Mhm.
we were kind of trying to find our rhythm. And
Yeah.
what do you think, guys? Do we have our rhythm now?
I
Man,
think we have it. Yes, we do.
it's like
I believe
Clyde
we do.
Stubblefield, J-Bo Starks, and Catfish.
There you go.
Well, we're really excited, and the thing that's really cool is that once again, not only are we gonna learn a little bit more about you, Mederia, but some of the audience will get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about me as well. So,
That's
hey,
right.
I want to start and open up by this. I'm going to show you something, and I told Jay and Kirk that this is kind of a surprise. So, Madeira, this is an all-access tour badge to the new tour. The new tour, which you could have been part of.
I absolutely remember that. Do I have the opportunity license to for your listeners just to give them a little
Absolutely.
insight to that?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
thank you, Kurt. By the way, a wink to Kurt here. But so for
Yes.
the listeners, I served with the Minneapolis Police Department a little over 30 years, and the culmination of that was as chief. However, as a young Minneapolis police officer, and having known Hucky, Hucky was the head of security for Prince at the time. I want to say when I got the call from you, it was 1995. You were just getting ready to embark on the European leg of that tour, as I recall. Hucky's the guru, so if I'm saying anything wrong, he'll correct me on this. But I get a call one afternoon, and Hucky says, "Hey, Mederia, we're getting ready to start a European tour, but Prince wants to do something a little bit different. He wants to add in a licensed police officer to Hucky's security detail team." And he said, and I told Prince, I think I know someone who might be the fit for joining our team. So Hucky gives me this rundown. I feel like I'm at some E.F. Hutton. He's giving me all of it. This is how this happened. This is how this happened. And at the end of Hucky's speech, I said, "Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to signing a contract." And Hucky pauses, and I said, and I'm a new husband and father at the time, and I said, "Yeah, we're looking forward to signing a contract." And Hucky gives me his best diplomatic Mahatma Gandhi, stern, like, "No, that there's no contract in this here business but just we're going to get on a call, the three of us, and Hucky, again, you let me do the talking, Mederia." And so a couple of days later, Hucky calls me. This is back, I think it was a landline, and there's a speaker,
Yeah.
I think, where him and Prince are meeting. And so Hucky's doing all the talking, right? And it's feeling good. And Hucky does all the talking in the background. I can hear Prince a little affirmative. yes, that kind of thing. Well, at the end of Hucky's conclusion, I knew I shouldn't have did it, but I said, "Well, Mr. Prince, I'm looking forward to joining Hockey Security Detail and going out on the European tour with you. And I'm really looking forward to just as soon as we get that contract signed, I'm ready." Crickets. I hear Hockey over the phone says, "Madeira, I'm going to call you back." And hangs up. And sure enough, Hucky calls me back. And it was, and again, his best, a little bit more stern Gandhi. "What were you thinking? I told you not to say anything about contracts." And so, needless to say, I was not the officer selected to join Hockey Security Detail with Prince, but I do recall you were in Ireland. And if I've got this wrong, they were able to get a police officer, not from Minnesota. I thought it was from out west, San Francisco, some other agency. But as I recall, Hucky, correct me if I'm wrong, something did not go so well with that officer. And according to you, you called me, I think it was late at night, and basically said, "We're already headed towards the tarmac. We're getting out of here, but something happened with that officer, and he's going to have to deal with whatever situation occurred." Does that ring a bell to you at all?
Yeah, it's pretty familiar, man. I
Okay,
maybe
yeah.
that memory's that sharp.
Yeah, but so, and I remember though telling Hucky when they hired this officer, I said, he came on board without a contract, and he said, Hucky said, "Yeah," and I said, "Be careful what you wish for." And so that was it.
Right.
So that was my almost opportunity to be a part of Hockey Security Detail with Prince. So I mentioned that dreaded word contract with Prince.
Well, obviously, as we are going to find out and we do a deeper dive, you made the right decision. And very successful and it's led you on an amazing journey. Madeira, a couple of things that I wanted to do, and I'm going to have my brothers jump in here a little bit. When we were growing up, I don't recall ever hearing the nickname Rondo. And so
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about that. Did that come later or did I just miss it?
Well, you probably missed it only because we were, the Arradondos and Austins, we're family. So no one in my family ever called me Rondo. That was the kids on the block. That was my
Oh,
Arradondo was too long, and so Rondo is what it was. So no one in my family members close. It just kind of percolated, just childhood playing on the playground over at the parks, and that's where that came about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
as I remember, did you guys live on, I want to say maybe, was it Park Avenue? Was it off 38th and
Absolutely.
Park? Which is
30,
really
yep, corner.
interesting. They're not too far from the whole George Floyd,
One block away,
area.
Hucky. Yep, 1 block
Wow.
away. Yeah, 1 block
You guys,
away,
and I was
exactly.
just thinking about that as we're talking about it. It's like, because things are starting to come to me now. I'm like, Madeira and them didn't live too far from George Floyd Circle now. I think it's what
Yep,
it
one
was.
one block. Yep, one
Wow.
block. Yep.
Yeah.
37th and Park. So we right on the corner.
Oh,
Yep, right by
wow.
38.
That
Yeah.
close.
That
Oh
close.
yeah.
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 Wow.
So, Madeira, tell me, and I remember having the conversations with you when I was with Prince and trying to get you on board, but what made you decide to pursue a career in law enforcement? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in Hucky, you'll be familiar with this too. Growing up in Minneapolis is a very close knit, small Midwestern town. Families again know each other, what have you. But we did not really see a whole lot of police officers that looked like us growing up in our neighborhoods and our communities. But after high school, something just got me, and I said, you know what? I'm going to pursue a degree in the time criminal justice law enforcement. And so I went to school actually to pursue that degree. I knew I wanted to come back because I went out of state, but I knew I wanted to come back to Minneapolis and eventually serve in our city. But that's what sort of prompted me and guided me. I knew I wanted to do something of service, JD, Kurt, and Hucky. So that was just kind of an area that I landed in, and so that's really how that started.
Great. Thank you.
I have a two-parter here. So my original question was, it's well known that you're the first Black police chief in Minneapolis, which was a historic milestone. My question to you on that end is, what was the increased burden and responsibility of that? How did that weigh upon you, this gravitas of that role, and which you took very seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, you certainly had paid your dues since you were an officer, a boot, as you will, from
Yeah.
1989 up to the incidents in 1992, all these other things that happened that lead you to that moment, kind of unceremoniously
Yeah.
inducted into that, and you kept your roots in that as well because you got inducted, sworn in at the Sabatani Center. I
Yep.
believe that was formerly
Sabathani.
Bryant.
Sabathani
Yep.
Center.
Sabathani, sorry,
Yep.
formerly Bryant Junior High, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Great question, Kurt. So I will tell you two things in terms of me stepping into that role. And as you read the book, the listeners will know that it wasn't something that just was planned out. There, it came about sadly through tragedy. So growing up in Minneapolis, certainly growing up in our Black community, family, elders, and history was always rooted in my upbringing. And
Yeah.
so as I stepped into the service of being a police officer, there's a couple of things I knew on that side. On the outside, I knew that I better do right by family and by my community and by my elders, because I also know that so many of them sacrificed so that I could someday, and others that look like me could someday be in those jobs, whether it's policing, fire, what have you. And so that was always there, always wanting to make sure that I was doing right by my community and family. Now, on the inside of the policing system, an agency, an organization that's been around for 160 years, that has its own culture, and it's a system. And there were those inherent things that, all systems can be broken and flawed. And certainly the Minneapolis Police Department is broken in areas. And so there's always that internal pressure of being a first of anything within that system. And so, just making sure how to properly navigate that. But I was also blessed having strong allyship within the department, Black officers who had been on the job before me, with their mentoring, tutelage, advice, and then again, community. So community was always and has always been a part of me. There was a reason why when I was sworn in, Kurt, that I decided the first chief swearing in ceremony to have it in the community. I had it at Sabathani Community Center, again, a couple of blocks from our neighborhood, our home growing up. And it was community. It was everything from the drum dancers to, we also had our Native American indigenous community there, the late Elder Clyde Velcourt, Dr. Josie Johnson, legacy. I mean, so it was about community. So, but navigating both of those worlds had always been there. Yeah.
I'd like to quote from your book, and I'd like you to expound on it a little bit. If American democracy is an experiment, as it has been described throughout our history, American policing is also an experiment that we're trying to get right.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, Kurt. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kurt. I'm sorry.
No, what I was going to follow through with that is expound on that is that in the 5 years in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, what has gotten right and what hasn't gotten right in your?
Yeah, great question. So when I mention the experiment in this democracy, in this American democracy, and policing being one of those, there's the real factual history that when policing started out, many of the roles were slave catchers. And that's just a real part of the history. There is a real part of the history that police departments participated in Jim Crow. There's a real part of the history that the civil rights, whether it was Bull Connor and some of the old black and white video that you see, those German shepherds being sicked on black women and young people. That's a part of the history. But there's also part of the history in this experiment in policing where in Minneapolis, back in the summer of 1931, white Irish immigrant police chief Bill Meehan made sure his officers protected Mr. Arthur and Edith Lee and their little daughter Mary, black family who Arthur had served in World War I, worked in the Postal Service here in Minneapolis, and then in the summer of 1931, he had the audacity to want to buy his family a home at the corner of 4600 Columbus, which was a no-go zone at that time, color barrier. And for 3 days and several days and nights that summer, a mob of white, angry residents pelted the house, profanity, racial slurs. I talk about this in the book, but it was white Minneapolis police officers that stood the line in between that vicious mob and the Lee family and made sure they were protected. Matter of fact, it was Chief Meehan at the time made sure that one of his officers made sure that little Mary got to school back and forth safely. So there's all of these things that are part and inherent of the American democracy system with policing. and we're trying to get it right. We have to continue to try to get it right because it isn't perfect, but there has been progress made. And to your last point of the question, what are some things that I've seen since the killing of Mr. Floyd? So one, I think you're starting now to see chiefs of police and sheriffs across this country when their officers are involved in misconduct. They're coming out very immediately and transparently and dealing with holding those officers accountable. I think you are starting to also see police chiefs and sheriffs working more collaboratively with their community members, less control, more collaboration. And also they're using, in this day and age, data. Data tells a story. I remember as my time as chief, some community members would say, Rondo, don't tell me who you are, show me your budget. Data is so critically important in telling our community's story and helping them guide us in collaboration with that. Technology, we're seeing everything from, I remember when I came on, squad car cameras were just the new thing. Well, now we've gone from that. We've got body-worn cameras. Many departments are using drones, AI, all of that. But lastly, Kurt, I will just say, all of that pales in comparison. These chiefs and sheriffs have to make sure they are getting men and women with character to do this job. At the end of the day, they have to have people with character to do this job. That's a great question. Thank you.
That's great. Rondo, thank you very much for that. And I'm going to kind of expound on that. First I want to say that obviously a good part of our conversation today is going to be about your new book, Chief Rondo, Securing Justice for the Murder of George Floyd, which will be released on Tuesday, May 13th. And so I actually have a two-part question as well. You were obviously a central figure in one of the most pivotal moments in recent racial justice. Before we talk about some of the actual aspects of the George Floyd murder and what happened administratively, can you talk about, and you paint a fascinating picture of when you first found out about what happened. Can you take us through a little bit of that in your emotions? And then I'd like you to talk about your reaction to the incident, what caused your swift decision to fire the 4 individuals, and what that aftermath was like.
Yeah, thank you, JD. So the evening of May 25th, 2020, it was probably about 8 or 8:30 p.m. I'm actually at home at the time, and I get a text alert, sort of a VIP text alert. And the information from one of my deputy chiefs is that MPD officers were out at 38th in Chicago. They were dealing with the situation out there. However, it looks like the individual they were dealing with had some sort of medical situation, is being rushed to Hennepin County Medical Center, HCMC, and doesn't look like that person's going to make it. They're not going to survive. Once I hear that, there's an automatic protocol and process that's in place. We call it a critical incident process. And so that it's a lot of things, but for me as chief, it requires me, I'm now immediately going to go to City Hall. I go to my office. There's notifications I have to make to the mayor. I'm going to get briefings and updates from investigators out there. So there's a process that happens. And so I go there. There's the involved officers. We're in a separate room in City Hall. They're making a very brief statement, a written statement, I should say. So there's all this process that goes on. And at one point during the evening, I asked my deputy chief, I said, I know there's what we call a poll camera. JD, it's a poll camera, sits across from Cup Foods and had been in place there for a while. And I asked him, I said, I pull that up. I want to see that. I want to see the video images there. And this poll camera, grainy video, no audio. Again, it's just on the other side of the street from 38th and Shoot, the Cup Foods. So I look at it, and the only thing I can see, many of your listeners they certainly will know and remember the Miss Darnella Frazier bystander video. But this one, all you can see is the backs of the officers and no audio. It's grainy. So I watched it several times. And again, the initial information I have is it was some sort of medical distress or emergency. Everyone leaves City Hall. I'm still up in my office briefing the mayor. And then about midnight, JD, I get a call. And it was a call that was going to change my life forever. I get a call from one of our social justice community activists, and Miss Nikima. And I talk about this in this book about unconventional allies and building allyship before the crisis occurs. Well, she calls me, and she did not have to call me, but she did. And she says, about midnight, she says, Rondo, she says, have you seen the video of one of your officers kneeling on the neck of this black man at 38th Chicago? and choking him to death. And I sat back and I knew she was referencing this call we had earlier in the day, but this information about choking and yelling, I did not know. So I said, no, I'm not familiar with that. She says, well, there's this video. I'm going to send it to you now. And sure enough, JD, she sends me the video. I get it on my cell phone, and I can tell you that I've seen a lot in over 3 decades of that work. And the very first time I watched the bystander video by Mr. Null Frazier, I sunk. I mean, my heart was ripped out, this feeling in my gut, because first thing is for all of us who now has that image seared through our memory, the inhumanity that Mr. Floyd went through, him begging out for someone in uniform to help him. And that went unanswered. Yeah, I had never experienced that before. And I will tell you, I knew after watching that video for the first time, watched it many times, but I watched after the first time, I knew it forever changed me. I knew it was going to change the city of Minneapolis forever. I knew it was going to have an impact nationally. I did not know clearly to the extent what the response and the reaction would be across our nation. And certainly I did not know the global impact it had. But I will tell you, to your point, I had never felt that before. And there was almost, JD, I'm trying to put this into words for you and your listeners, but you know, when something so tragic occurs and you know that you're not going to be able to save everybody. I'm trying to describe that as that what occurred was going to impact so many people. And as one, I wanted to put my arms around to protect the community. I also know that the good officers who come to work every day, who take their oath seriously, who take that promise seriously with serving the people, they were going to be forever impacted by this. Clearly, the family of Mr. Floyd, all of these things were in my heart and in my mind. And I just knew that it was going to be significant beyond a size and scope that I could never have imagined.
Thank you for that, Rondo.
Yeah.
And the follow-up to that question is, can you take us through the process that led to the terminations of the 4 police officers involved? And your emotions. I mean, there obviously there's administrative things you had to go through. You know, of course, you're a human being. You know, what was going through your mind simultaneously?
Well, that's a great question. You mentioned an interesting word, process, because again, we're talking about systems, right? And there's processes and systems. So back in the summer, when I was tapped to become the acting chief, we had another tragedy 3 years prior. Justine Bruchik was shot and killed. She was a resident in Southwest Minneapolis who called 911, believing she heard a prowler, someone in her alley, and one of our former officers, Muhammad Noor, shot and killed her. Was tapped after that, a couple of days after that. The first thing I did is I went home to my little kitchen table. I pulled out a little notepad and I wrote, because I knew we needed a new vision moving forward. And so I wrote my vision statement. And the first portion of that vision statement, I talk about the sanctity of life. And I talk about how that has to rule and guide everything that we do as public servants. And I talk about how there are inherent dangers that come with the job, but for the most part, the people that do this work will go home safely at the end of the night, and we need our community to go home safely at the end of our shifts. And so sanctity of life is very important. I needed, by the way, I said that to all sworn and civilians, because I needed them to know what they could expect of me as their chief, but certainly what I needed to expect from them. And so when that video, I saw it for the first time, and I knew that had violated what had occurred at 30th in Chicago, had violated every part of that value-based, how we're supposed to operate, how we're supposed to serve. That was violated. The lack of humanity, that was so egregious. And so when you said the word process, JD, I did not need a lot of processes, and my eyes didn't lie to me. I saw what I saw. And so as chief, it's interesting in terms of the state of Minnesota. I report to a mayor, but as chief, I'm the sole person who can give discipline to police officers, police employees. And so I used that authority and I terminated all 4 officers. And the other 3, because we have a duty to intervene. And to remain silent is complicit. If you see something that is occurring against another human being and you don't act, you're complicit. And the worst thing a leader can be is indifferent to human suffering. That's when I made the decision That's when I made the decision. I will also just say the book points this out. There's a chapter called When 32 Becomes 36.
Mhm.
After I saw the video, the early morning hours, I also contacted our FBI special agent in charge, and I give him a lot of credit. We had not known each other for that long, but I said, I've got a situation that I just witnessed on video in my city, and I said, I believe it's a civil rights violation. I need your agents up at 30th Chicago like yesterday. And he said, Round, if you're calling me at 1 in the morning, I know it ain't good. And he got those agents up there. So, but I called 32 of our leaders in our community. And by the way, they were faith leaders, they were activists, they were just our core sort of influential people, the leaders respected in our community. And I said, some of you were sleeping, I'm leaving a voicemail message, but I said, I need you all to meet me in my office at 8 a.m. the next morning. Many of them came, again, 32, 36 showed up, but many of them came in weeping. They had just now, the video had made it viral now, so they're waking up to this. Those were the initial things that I did right after seeing the video.
Thank you.
Rondo, I do believe the quote that the takeaway that I got from that to put a button on what you just said was, what you permit, you promote.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so again, as a leader, and Kurt, thank you for saying that, because I have to set the example. And when an officer is involved in misconduct, and rightfully so, the community is going to be looking at, well, who's their leadership? And again, what you permit, you promote. And so,
So, Mederia, I have a quick question that I'd like to ask you. So, in a relatively short period of time, you got these two major events that had a huge impact on MPD. And so obviously, there's going to be after these events, there must have been some serious trust issues with the community. I'd like to know, how did you go about building that trust with law enforcement in the community? I mean, obviously it was damaged. And hearing what you had to say earlier and knowing you as I do, and what kind of individual you are, I know that you must have felt that this was really important and something that we needed to do, but it must have not have been easy. And I'd like to have you talk a little bit about that.
yeah, Hucky, thank you for that. Trust is everything. And I've always said to the officers that the greatest gift the community can ever give you in your career is the benefit of the doubt, but you have to earn that. So when the bad thing goes wrong, they will at least pause and say, okay, because I know JD, based because I know Kurt or Hucky, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but to do right. And so Hucky, when those tragedies occurred and that trust was broken, I have to be out there and I have to have those conversations with them, and they have to be real, they have to be candid, they have to be raw. And because again, I'm a student of history and I understand the pain that many communities in Minneapolis have gone through. And so yeah, I have to be out there. I have to be in those spaces. I have to listen. I would tell my command staff that, oftentimes if people are angry, upset, they're carrying trauma, I said, they're basically, it's from the neck down. They may not know you. The response is, Rondo, why are they yelling at me? I wasn't even there 20 years ago. Why are they upset? It's not you. It's from the neck down. That uniform represents a lot of trauma for many people in our community. And it's difficult sometimes. I mean, you can imagine if you're in a space and you have to engage with people and interact with them in their lives, and they're angry, and you weren't the person that did the trauma, but you have to understand the space and the place where that comes from. So Hucky, yeah, it's constant. You can't. Now we'll just say this again to your point. Miss Nakima didn't just call me out of the blue at midnight that night. We had built that relationship up over 5 years. And by the way, it didn't mean we always agreed on things, but we found commonality. She wanted to make sure that her young children did not have to grow up fearing the police in Minneapolis. She wanted to make sure that violent crime wasn't something that happened every day in Minneapolis. She also wanted to make sure that there were good public servants who were out there doing the job. But if they messed up, she also wanted to make sure they were being held accountable. All things I agree with. So you have to do that. And the other thing is, all three of you will understand is our community's got a pretty good BS meter. don't tell them something and it ain't right. I mean, because they will check you on that immediately. So every time I had those relationships, and by the way, sometimes it's being honest and just telling, I don't know, I don't have all, I don't know. But they'll accept that. But if you start to mislead, that's when you're going to run into problems. But Hucky, it was constant, just trying to build those relationships, because there are going to be things within that system of policing that there's going to be setbacks, and it's going to disappoint people. It is.
So looking at my notes, you have a lot. There's a lot. You spoke directly to George Floyd's family and publicly took a strong stance on accountability. Where did that strength and clarity come from during such a volatile and emotional time?
Kurt, I will tell you and your listeners simply, it was the way I was raised. It was the way I was raised. My parents raised me that you respect people and you treat people with dignity. And when you're wrong, say you're sorry. I wish I could say there was some sort of, but that's just the way I was raised. And quite frankly, if my dear mother or my father were there next to me, they would have expected me to say that. And so that's really, and it's the right thing. I believe it's the right thing to do.
So, Rondo, after everything that's happened, what does good policing mean to you today? And is Minneapolis headed in that direction? Are they there yet?
So I believe that there's progress that has been made. And I'll tell you one why I believe that. So you may recall that Mr. Floyd was killed in May of 2020. That following year, there was, for the first time ever, a ballot referendum in the next election. And one of the keys to that ballot referendum talked about basically removing the Minneapolis Police Department as we know it and creating another sort of public safety or community safety, whatever that would be. And I spoke on that. I mentioned in the book, I was reprimanded for speaking publicly on that. The community came out and they voted. And believe it or not, the communities that have had the most historical grievances with the police, communities of color, they voted to make sure that did not occur, because they believed, yes, we need to make sure we hold our police accountable, but we still need police. And so that was a sign to me that even amidst the tragedy that the city had just went through, the burnings and the looting and just the unrest, that we understood we still need this experiment in democracy. I think that's a perfect example of it. We don't get it right all the time, but there's this understanding until something, we have to keep improving upon it. And I think there's many of your listeners now today that could say, yeah, democracy seems like it's a messy thing, but the goal is that we have to try to keep improving it. And so that was an area, JD, where I saw, I mean, that was huge for that city, Minneapolis, for the voters to say that even with what occurred, we still understand we need a Minneapolis Police Department. And so we see it there. We're starting to see it now with a lot more collaboration with different community groups who are, again, not control, but collaboration, who are also helping the Minneapolis Police Department deal with issues of juvenile delinquency, just juveniles who don't have anything better to do, and getting them summer jobs and helping people with substance use disorder, all of those things. So there's progress that is being made, but JD, Kurt, and Hucky, it's continual. There's more work that needs to be done. And even after Mr. Floyd was killed, we know about a year later, the tragedy that happened to Mr. Tyree Nichols in Memphis. So you have to constantly keep working at it.
Mederia, and I just wanted to touch a little bit. I had a question I was going to ask you about that ballot, but, I lived in North Minneapolis for many years, and I can tell you this, there's a misconception that the people of North Minneapolis didn't want police officers in our neighborhood, and that was just simply untrue.
Yes.
And I think you really hit it on the head. It's just that all people have been asking is just for officers to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
And I know that was a direction that you had begun to really focus and work really hard on. I feel like it's continued, since you've left office, but there's still a long ways to go. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I know that you're no longer in that position anymore, but the numbers for MPD have came down to an all-time low. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on how do we get staffing back up to a level that's going to be able to safely protect the community.
That's a great question. And staffing is, we've never seen uh, a couple of things. There's criminologists have said and coined the term the Chauvin effect, where you are seeing police agencies across the country, they're losing people, whether it's through PTSD, whether it's through just normal attrition, whether it's through massive retirements. But every agency is struggling to hire to get those good character people on the job. Minneapolis, absolutely. They're about a third less than when I was there, and that's critical. And I know that Chief O'Hara, the current chief, is doing his best to try to get those numbers back up. But a couple of things I think that, well, here's what we're seeing in Minneapolis right now. There was a contract that was just recently signed. Minneapolis is offering a significant increase in pay, just that first year pay incentive to bring officers on, to bring people on. They're being creative in how they message. I used to always say that, if anybody ever watches a Super Bowl every year, you can count on it that there's going to be at least a 60-second spot. Looks like it was directed by Steven Spielberg of the Navy, Marines, right? And whether you're 6 years old or 60, then you can rappel out of a helicopter after you see the 60-second spot. You may not even know if that branch of the government is going through scandal or bad times, but those agencies control their message. You're seeing agencies reach out now to private sector communications teams to build a good message. I think you have to speak a different way today for the generation that you want to come into your communities and be those guardians, be those public servants. And so that's going to be important. And I think chiefs across the country are really going to have to ensure that we are a values-driven agency, that what may have been tolerated in the past, those days are done with. And we need people who truly care about their communities, and we need them to be a part of that. And we're also, again, collaboration. We need schools and faith leaders and educators and all those people at the table to help us recruit, because many of us know in our community, she'd be a great police officer, or he would be a great police officer, and we have to support them in that.
So you've had a remarkable journey from the south side of Minneapolis to leading the city through one of the most turbulent chapters in its history, Rondo. Now that you've stepped away from the badge, and with your new book coming out on May 13th, just got to mention that again, Chief Rondo, Securing for the Murder of George Floyd, with an accompanying audiobook as well. What's next for you, whether it's writing, public service, or something else entirely?
Yeah, so I've never, again, service is part of my DNA as a Minneapolis Southside kid growing up. And so, I'm just continuing to stay involved. Public housing has been very near and dear to me, the residents here in Minneapolis. And so I'm a board commissioner with public housing, and making sure that their voices are elevated. A few years ago, Kurt, JD, and Hucky, I remember the Minneapolis fire chief said to me, Rondo, he says, I'm going to ask you for a favor, but it's an important one. We are having so many opioid, fentanyl-related overdose deaths in our city that we can no longer get to all these calls. I'm going to ask you, Rondo, if you would make sure that your officers start carrying Narcan, because we just can't get to all these calls. And we did. We had to start carrying Narcan. And so I'm with Fentanyl Free Communities, which is a group that's focused on trying to bring education awareness, particularly to our young people. Fentanyl deaths occurred last year in America alone. Over 100,000 folks died from it. So those are things that are near and dear to me. I'm also a board member of the Urban League Twin Cities. So along with that, I've been doing a lot of outreach. I was asked to come out and do some advising work with the country of Liberia and Liberia, Africa. They've gone through 2 civil wars in my lifetime. They've had a lot of challenges over there, but the current president, His Excellency Joseph Boakai, and the Inspector General of Policing, Gregory Coleman, they're really trying to turn that around. The people of Liberia are just so gracious. And so I've been over there a couple of times and really trying to do some work there. And then continuing to work with whether it's CEOs or entrepreneurs or governments about what is it like to lead and have a values-driven focus and purpose. So that keeps me busy these days.
To follow up with that, Rondo, Is that through your consulting endeavor, Optimus Sui?
Yep, that is correct. And so after stepping away from the police service, I started my own consulting. And and again, I'm about continual growth. And so whether it's helping our residents in public housing in Minneapolis or helping trying to stabilize and bring a pathway forward, working with leaders in Liberia, Africa, those are things that really inspire.
That's great. That's really great. Rondo, I can't tell you how honored we are to have had you with us today. And I think that I speak for Kurt, Hucky, and myself. It has absolutely been our pleasure. We're humbled, that you considered the Electric Vibe. We're very grateful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your candor, the time that you took. I know that the subject matter in the murder of George Floyd is still a very raw experience for many of us, and I imagine that it will be going forward. But the Electric Vibe is just honored to have you here to talk about your book, to talk about your mission, to talk about the incident, and to keep that awareness alive. So I just wanted to express our sincere gratitude.
Well, I want to just say thank you to the Electric Vibe. All three of you have been, again, individuals that I have a great deal of respect for, and for your podcast to bring about a conversation about very relevant and important issues today. I think it's so very important. And to have this platform, I think it's absolutely important. So I'm truly honored and humbled to be a part of this. I support the Electric Vibe podcast. And so please consider me, again, a continued friend and ally in the work that you're doing. And it's so important, particularly for your younger listeners. Information is critically important. And to have these conversations, it's so important. So I'm just thankful that you're doing this work. It's good work.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Hucky, the book is Chief Rondo, Securing Justice for the Murder of George Floyd, again being released on Tuesday, May 13th. We are going to include the links for where our listeners can purchase the book. Any other engagements coming up? Speaking engagements, anything? Book signings, anything, Rondo?
Yes, there's several. And so between some media that's going to be going on throughout the month. I'll be on a lot of the national and local television and radio formats. Interestingly enough, the UK, the 5-year anniversary obviously is coming up here this month. But if you take a look at the reaction, the response, and what the UK's history has also been in terms of their police services and communities of it. It's very interesting. So there's I know I'll be doing some speaking with the UK audience as well, but it had obviously a global impact. And so, but yeah, there'll be spaces where I'll be continuing to have this conversation.
Great. Hucky?
Well, like Jay just said, Rondo, man, what a pleasure to have you here with us today. And it gives me a sense of pride to be able to see an individual that I grew up with as a young person and have known for many years, and our family spent time together to have such an impact in the city of Minneapolis. And I want to let you know that I appreciate all the hard work that you've done, and I appreciate the things that you're continuing to do. We do want to make sure that any social media plugs that you want to, let our audience know that you share them with us. We want to make sure that we're encouraging everybody to check out your book, but also too, if they just want to see what you're up to these days. And great. We normally usually do a little thing at the end, and we're going to save you last, Rhonda, but there's something we want to say to the audience. And one of the things that I always share with everyone is continue to be kind, continue to show love and compassion to one another. Jay?
I'm going to say once again, Chief Rondo, thank you very much again. I can't say it enough how honored that we are. And to our listeners, if you like what you see and hear, please remember to hit and smash that like and subscribe button so we can continue to bring you more valuable content like we're doing today with Chief Rondo. And as I like to say, when the universe comes knocking, you have to answer that door. Kurt?
Thank you, Jay. So I know that you wanted to mention that you're a lover of music like we all are here.
Yes.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I asked you personally, top 5 albums in no particular order. And I'm just going to read them off if you don't mind.
Yes.
So this is the quality of human being that we're dealing with today. Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. And you said your favorite track from that was what again? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder. Can't hardly argue with that. Asia, the album by Steely Dan, and you said the title track, I think, was your favorite.
Track.
Right. Okay, Person to Person Live, Average White Band.
If I Ever Lose This Heaven.
Excellent. And of course, this is a hard one to pick one track off where we already talked about this before recording. And that's Aretha Franklin's live album, Amazing Grace.
All of
Yeah,
it.
I know.
It's the queen. All of it. Yes. Yes.
How can you
Yes.
argue with that?
That's
Folks,
right.
I just had to mention that it's been a tremendous honor to reconnect with you and just have this rapport with you. And as the guy said, that, we hope this is an ongoing conversation for years to come, because it's going to be sorely needed in this world that we live in.
Yeah.
And as I like to always say, rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely. Amen to that, Kurt. Absolutely. Well,
Great.
again, I just want to say thank you all. Um, it's interesting that you talked about music and you asked me about my music. Some divine intervention, for some reason, music brings us together. Music just brings us together. The fact that the three of you have this Electric Vibe podcast can focus or center on music, which I believe, as we were doing tonight, it starts dialogue. It starts conversation. And I don't have to know what your personal ideological views are, politics, who you pray to, who you love, but it's a connecting tissue. And we don't have a lot of that today. And trust me, we need that. And so for your listeners, I'm telling you, this is a dose of good medicine, the Electric Eye podcast. And so I'm just, again, having seen so much division and strife in our societies, the fact that the three of you are able to bring this connective tissue to have a conversation in a non-judgmental way, I think it's so important. It's so needed today. And so I just want, again, it's a blessing. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And to everyone else, thank you and good night. Peace.
Peace.